Welcome to Grounded with John Tester and Maritza Giorgio. We are starting things off early if you are in Mountain Time Zone or on the Pacific Coast because, John Tester's got to get out and farm. But we want to welcome our friend Ryan Busse here to the conversation. We just figured we'd just get going right out of the gate. Ryan, of course, ran for governor of Montana in the last cycle. And before that, he was a firearms executive who would I call you a whistleblower, Ryan? I feel like I would call you a whistleblower.
Mm, I don't know about that. I just told the story of my life. So I guess I'm a storyteller. Just,
Okay.
just told there's some concerning things in the world, and thought I had to step up. I want to start by saying, um, for anybody who's ever grown up on a farm and ranch, which I did, this is not early. This is late. So
Right.
I know
Yeah, he's
you're.
mad. He's probably mad
I
right
know,
now.
I know.
That-
So you're acting like it's early, but Tessa's like, "Gee, many Christmas! I should have been on the track for 3 hours already."
Yeah, half a day's already gone. We're
Yeah.
burning daylight, man.
He'll literally call me and say, "Are you out of bed yet? Are you out of bed yet?" And most of the time the answer is no.
I mean, it's not everybody that gets to keep the journalist hours, right? So, I mean,
All
it's not
right.
like banker's
Yeah,
hours.
yeah, right. It's just such a glamorous lifestyle and, we
Mhm.
get plenty of rest and we're not constantly burned out or
No,
riddled with anxiety. Yeah.
So I
You're
just I just want to add to this conversation by saying that we both got laid off, but I work. She goes to Greece and she goes to Disneyland like every other week. So the journalist thing ain't a bad gig. I'm just telling you. It's
Mm.
got
Listen, just because I'm irresponsible doesn't mean I have it
Yeah,
good. I'm just irresponsible.
yeah. That journalist thing looks glorious here the last few months. It looks positively amazing. Um,
Oh,
I hope I don't find you on a travel list to El Salvador, Marisa.
I kinda hope that too, actually. Yeah, I'm really pulling for that. So, yeah, does everyone have their coffee? You guys have your coffee? It's a coffee chat.
Yeah, we're
Come
good.
on, Tester. All right.
Yeah.
So we usually go through headlines before our guest joins us, Ryan.
Mm.
But I just thought we would just go live and kind of shoot the shit together over our coffee and
Yeah.
welcome our friends here who are joining us to weigh in. If you have any comments or questions, we'll just go through it. So I want to talk a little bit about Texas first because the New York Times came out with this piece this weekend. They reviewed documents that showed almost two-thirds of calls into FEMA's disaster line went totally unanswered right in the middle of that horrific flooding in central Texas. They say that's because FEMA laid off hundreds of contractors at call centers on July 5th. That's a day after the Guadalupe River rose 26 feet in 45 minutes. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem did not renew those contracts until 5 days later. Now, she went on Meet the Press this weekend and said, well, this just isn't true. But the data that the New York Times released says, on July 5th, before those contracts expired, they answered 99.7% of the calls. The next day, it was 35.8%. The next day, 15.9%.
It would
what
have been
happened.
nice to have a senator back there that could have put the hammer on this gutting of expertise. Gee, Christmas.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So interesting enough, yesterday a couple friends of my son came up. They live in Texas, and they were talking. They're about an hour away from where it flooded, and they were talking about the fact that it was a record amount of rain, and it has been, and there's been a lot of deaths in Texas this spring because of climate events. And I would just tell you this: you cannot lay off people like has been done in this administration and expect calls to get answered. You can't. And as far as Kristi Noem goes, I watched Kristi Noem stand there as ICE put a United States senator on the floor in California about a month ago. So her credibility isn't exactly at the top of the list. And for her to say that the numbers aren't right, prove it. Prove it. Prove those numbers aren't right. Because the truth is that, it was an extreme climate event. And when people don't know that it's happening or don't know the extent of what is happening, people end up dying. And that's what this is about, really. Um, the
Yeah.
Weather Service does an incredible job predicting weather, which is amazingly tough to do, but they do an amazing job. But if that information does not get in the hands of the people who need it, then this is what happens. And by the way, this isn't the last climate event that's going to happen this summer. You can bet your bottom dollar that this is going to
Mhm.
be happening several other more times moving forward, because that's just the way the climate is these days. You see, hell, we saw 90-degree temperatures in May. When's the last time we saw that in Montana?
Never.
It's
Yeah, I don't.
crazy. And so you just see all this crazy shit going on when it comes to the weather. And if people don't know, they might say, there's a big rain coming, but the extent of the event, with rivers rising as quickly as they rose. And look, it's true. It was an event that probably never happened before, but events that never happened before happen every damn week. And
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
to get rid of people that are there to answer the call, to let people know what's going on when they're in crisis is really important. And Christy Nome needs to prove the fact that those calls weren't answered. Prove it. Prove it. Show us the logs that they were answered.
Yeah, this is look, as Senator Tester said, you don't have to be a nuclear scientist to know we're going to have a higher need for expertise, a higher need for good governance, a higher need for forecasting, a higher need for FEMA response, not lower. And not only do we have storm impacts slamming, various regions of the country within a day or so. We just had friends visiting from North Carolina here last night because
Mhm.
in Montana, um, Senator Tester probably knows this. We have a couple of seasons. You got 9 months of winter and 3 months of company, right? So we're having about 3 months of company right now. And within 24 hours of that disaster striking Texas, it's almost the same thing was striking North Carolina again. And so we these 100-year events are now 10-year events and 5-year events, and we can't, as a country, expect to have uh, decent responses and warnings when we have elected a government who wants to literally gut expertise. I mean, the head of FEMA, after he was appointed, said something like, I didn't even know we had, hurricane warning system or whatever. Like the guy had literally zero expertise to run FEMA. Um, and it's sad, I floated the Guadalupe River. It's a beautiful little river when it's little. Um, it's sad to have people die needlessly in the country.
Well, then we
And
had this weekend, as long as we're not talking about disasters, wildfire destroyed dozens of buildings, including the historic lodge on the Grand Canyon's North Rim, and officials have already closed that area of the Grand Canyon for the rest of the season. You talk
it
about, like, unprecedented events happening every week. Well, we are seeing that.
we're going to have more of them. We have another. Meanwhile, we have another wildfire-induced smoke season in Canada. The smoke's pouring over into Minnesota. I don't know if you saw a member of the House Representatives Republican member of House Representatives from Minnesota is now calling for an investigation into Canada for pumping wildfire smoke into the U.S. up there. Um, Instead of properly funding climate response, climate change mitigation, FEMA. Like we're now literally, like the old song "Blame Canada." Are you serious? It's crazy talk.
Yeah, I did not see that, Congressman.
I did not either.
Yeah,
Jesus, caramba.
yeah. He's calling for an investigation into Canada's forest management practices because they're piping wildfire smoke into Minnesota, and he doesn't like it on his lake weekends.
Oh,
Tough plan.
man. Well, look, this is the story that won't die even if the president would like it to. So let's get into the Epstein stuff. You guys up for this? You ready to get into Epstein?
Yeah.
It's ugly, slimy stuff, but for those of us who have read MAGA tweets and truths, I think Trump is all but telling you he's on the Epstein list. Like, get over it, don't look at it, but he's on there.
Well, let's go
And
over kind of what happened this weekend. I mean, it's been just a huge back and forth, and there's a lot to kind of follow along with. So last week, the DOJ said no client list for Jeffrey Epstein exists, and they also said that they have proof he committed suicide. He wasn't murdered, and that goes against a lot of the theories. I've seen conspiracy theories from both sides of the aisle on this. So, Epstein died in prison in 2019. So conspiracy theories have surrounded this for years, like I said, on both sides of the aisle. AG Pam Bondi said earlier this year the client list was on her desk, ready to be reviewed. She said that on I think it was Fox News. So now the administration says, oh, no, does not exist. Trump lashed out at reporters last week when they asked about it. And then on social media this weekend, he's trying to dismiss it. He's trying to turn the attention on his political enemies instead. He's playing the hits here. Many of his supporters online are turning on him. His base is not happy. NBC reports that Deputy Director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, is considering resigning over this. Other outlets report that FBI Director Kash Patel is furious. He's denying resignation rumors. He came out in defense of the president yesterday or 2 days ago. And in the middle of it all, Trump resurrected his attacks on comedian Rosie O'Donnell, saying she's a threat. He's saying he's considering taking away her U.S. citizenship. So fact check, he can't do that. We see people like Mike Flynn turning on him over this. So where do we start? Where should we start unpacking this whole thing? Tester, I'll let you go first.
I think we got to start with Elon Musk. He kind of let the cat out, right? You know,
I forgot about
Elon
that part.
said
Yeah.
that the president was on the list. He obviously saw it while he was in the middle of Doge, in the middle of the White House, doing the work that the president had instructed him to do, getting rid of some of the people that we just talked about to deal with issues around disasters, and he let it out. I think Pam Bondi talked about that. She had the list on her desk. She had the list on her desk. That's exactly right. And they ought to release the list. They ought to just release the list and let people know what's going on with the people that are on it. I'm sure there's people on both sides of the aisle on that list. So what the hell? Release it. Both sides are incriminated. People pretty much hate Republicans and Democrats right now. So release the list and let's see what's on it. And let's dig down and find out what really happened to Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, truthfully, let's find out. Let's open the books. I mean, the first thing that Trump did when he got in office is he opened the JFK files. Well, what the hell? They give them to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Well, open these files, let people see what's going on. That's what his base wants. And I think that's what most Americans want, and that's what he ought to do.
Yeah, I think Senator Tester's right, and I think one thing that Democrats should. I run into a lot of Democrats who think this is kind of slimy business below us to talk about, sort of soap opera-ish. Look, it's quite likely there's serious criminal activity, um, you know, in those lists. We just went through a 4-year election cycle where pedophilia was commonly discussed, and Democrats like Senator Tester and I were, often those sorts of indictments are on all sorts of online message boards and everything. Just
Mm-hmm.
you know, they like to throw it around here. So I think it's really important that Democrats realize sort of the era of rational issue-based politics is kind of gone. That's what Senator Tester is so good at. That's what made him so awesome in the Senate. But in our political sort of election sphere, these sort of emotional conspiracy theory, justice-based sort of things are really important. And so for Democrats to look past this as as something to hammer on, as something that's important base, as something that is an emotional connector for so many MAGA voters, I think they're totally missing the boat. This is a hugely important thing for a large number of the MAGA base. And I don't like to get on here and plug other podcasts, but if folks aren't listening to Sarah Longwell's The Focus Group podcast, they really should. She just did a really good one. She's talking to Trump voters about the Epstein list. And if you want to understand how important it is, you should go listen to that podcast. If you want to listen to that podcast for the leading up to the 2024 election, you'd have known where the 2024 election was headed. It's a really good, she's just talking to voters out there. So go listen to that podcast, and you'll understand how important this issue is. But I think we ought to be hammering it.
Well, I mean, we see that it's important, and, our friend Heather Cox Richardson, who so brilliantly lays out the day's news at the end of every day in her letters, she wrote last night that for the first time ever, Trump got ratioed on his own platform, meaning that there were more comments on his posts than likes or
Mhm.
shares, and a lot of those comments are negative, and a lot of those comments are really trying to hold him accountable and saying, "Release this," we voted for you to do this, do better. So I think you can't this is staying in the news cycle, and this is something that a lot of his base is really, really upset about, and so I think that is really the interesting piece of this. So many things that we've seen happen over the years, they move on, they move on, they move on, but this is sticking, and this is something that is really causing a major fracture from appearances, causing a major fracture inside MAGA.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could fix it pretty easy. Just come clean, let the information out.
Well, you're already seeing now, right? He's already saying, "Well, okay, there is a list, but Obama made it. Biden doctored
Mm.
it." Like, so they're already trying to adjust expectations, right? Which is MAGA speak for, yes, Trump's on it, and we're gonna try to deteriorate the validity of the list with this forecasting that they're doing. So, you know, JT's right. There is a list, and it should be released, and you can just push send anytime. Could send it, he could break it right here, Maritza. You could have him on here, and they could just release
The
the list right to
president?
you.
We'll just have the
Yeah.
president on? I'm sure he'd love to do that. So here's what I predict. We're gonna see John Tester use his spare time when he's on the tractor starting to write FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests. He's gonna go for, the information about FEMA calls. He's gonna go for the Epstein list. What else are you gonna file for?
Here's the only problem. I mean, the president listens to the Supreme Court rarely, and so why would he listen to me with FOIA requests?
Okay, but we did not talk about the Rosie O'Donnell thing. He's threatening publicly that he's considering taking away her US citizenship.
Oh,
I don't know what else to say other than, like, this is this look, it's batshit crazy. You might as well just say what it is. Like, to have I don't there's lots of US citizens that I don't agree with. I've never conceived of saying, "Well, let's just make them an uncitizen." Like, it's just crazy talk. But
Also,
this is what
she moved to Ireland.
mm,
She's not even here. She moved to Ireland. But I mean, like that to me, to start threatening to strip citizens of their citizenship, not even like naturalized citizens, which we've seen that being floated around, but like born here US citizens.
mhm,
Tester, you have nothing
that
to say about this?
well,
it's
I
so
have plenty
far
to say about it. I mean, what the hell? I mean, I mean, I'm just not surprised by it at all. I'm not surprised at all by it. I mean, just think what's going on here. I mean, she probably, by the way, she's probably living, doing good things in Ireland. But the truth is, I mean, you got people that are shipped off to El Salvador with no due process. You've got a case in front of the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court walked on birthright citizenship. The Supreme Court didn't make a decision on it; they punted. You've got people within the administration that are being fired if they don't agree 100% with Donald Trump's views on stuff. This shouldn't be surprising. I mean, it really isn't. Is it right? Hell no, it's not right. Does it go against our Constitution? Yeah, absolutely. But, I mean, what can I say? I mean, what can I say other than
Okay.
it's just not surprising.
so I haven't talked to Senator Tester about this, so I don't mean to impose my views on immigration on him, and he's free to correct any of this if he wants to. But I think that as a country, immigration and immigration policy is important, and I do think the Biden administration fumbled this badly, and I think a lot of the situation we're in is a weird sort of responsibility of the Biden administration fumbling immigration policy for 4 years. That being said, if you want to fix immigration policy, there's a way to do it without instituting terror and immorality in this country. You could have an e-verify system that quickly helped remove, um, undocumented citizens if that's what the country wants to do in a legal sane, moral way without running mask agents. Mask agents. I'm sorry, if a mask agent comes up to me and I don't know who they are, I mean, I mean, they better be well armed. Is all I can say. Like, this is terror they're trying to do, versus responsible immigration policy. And Trump barking about removing some U.S. citizenship is just a further extension of that terror. It's not a responsible way to institute immigration policy. If that Again, if that's what the country voted for, and I think it's hard to debate that the country did vote for that. There's a way to do it morally and ethically, and that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, by the way, I agree with that 100%, Ryan. The only thing I would add to that is the fact that about 8 months before the election, there was a bipartisan bill on the floor of the Senate that would have helped fix this problem. And it was a Biden problem, but it would have helped fix this problem. And remember, Trump came in and said, "Hey, you guys all vote against this because I want to use this as a political issue."
Yeah.
Well, now it's beyond a political issue. Now they're going in. It's not criminals they're taking out. They're taking out everybody. And you're right. They're just instituting folks as well. Terror is a good reason, or good word for it. I mean, people are worried. They're running. Hell, a guy got killed last week because he ran off the roof of a building. I mean, this is crazy. There is a humane way to do this. And by the way, the right thing to do is get rid of the criminals, but they went far beyond that. They went far beyond the people who are a public threat, far beyond it. And by the way, you're going to see in states like Montana, and there's already heard about it in Florida, where people are not going to come to this country because they're afraid to come to this country now. So our recreation economy from foreign countries, and by the way, how you build economy is bringing in outside money. So this is great money for building the economy, isn't going to be showing up.
I think it's worth mentioning too, it's easy to put blame on one president, but this is an issue that's plagued presidents for decades. I mean, how to handle this.
It has, and there was a solution, and the truth is the administration did not do a very good job, because of groups out there, which I've never been able to figure out who the hell they are, that thought that this was a good policy to have an open border. It's bullshit.
Yeah, I think look, I'm somebody who believes that Democrats getting their shit together and winning elections is really important because I really don't want to live in an autocratic country that strips our government apart, ruins our economy and our environment and everything else. So I say this in the spirit of Democrats getting their shit together here. Um, Donald Trump came down that escalator, and the first thing he did was barked about Mexican rapist, right? So he ran originally on immigration. Immigration got him elected. Then immigration eventually got him reelected. But in the meantime, as Senator Tester notes, we had a Democratic administration that listened to, air quotes here, the groups who told them that the most liberal immigration policy, just like sort of taking their eye off the ball on immigration policy, was a good move. And it wasn't. And it probably led to Donald Trump 2.0. And that's a sad outcome for our country. And so I think it's important that we espouse good, solid policy, and at the same time we have to call out this terrorizing that's going on. There's nothing American about what they're doing with mask agents roving the streets and running people off roofs.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. A lot happening over the last week on this issue. And we saw over the weekend a group of bipartisan lawmakers visiting Alligator Alcatraz. That's that detention facility for immigrants in Florida. So Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz said she saw vile conditions. She described inhumane treatment. Humans are being abused, she said. Then a Republican state senator described it as well run, clean, safe. Important to note, journalists were not allowed on the tour. And then DHS Secretary Kristi Noem says she's talking with 5 other Republican governors about modeling other facilities on this one in Florida. So saying they're looking at opening more in 5 other states right now.
I think you better be ready. Senator Tester can comment on this, but the big bullshit bill that was just passed has funding for ICE in there that usurps almost all military budgets of almost all nations on this earth. So if you think Alligator Alcatraz is bad, you better get ready for that times about 200 because that's what's in this budget.
Yeah, I'll go back to what I've said on damn near every podcast, if not every podcast, multiple. Congress needs to step up, and Congress needs to make some determinations here. I will bet you, I would love to have somebody show me how the money got to El Salvador for that prison. I bet you Congress never have their fingerprints on that at all, and they should have. And I think Congress needs to have their fingerprints on this. If they're building prisons or they're contracting with private prisons, I don't care either one. Congress needs to have a say in that, and Congress has not. And we saw in the big beautiful bill, we saw Tillis, he just couldn't take it anymore. He just couldn't take the stuff that bill was going to do to his home state of North Carolina, and he finally said, "I'm not going to vote for this thing." And then he's talked about other folks that he wouldn't have voted for either. Look, at some point in time, those good people I served with should get a fill of this shit, and they should start speaking up and saying, "Hey, this is not what the United States of America is. We need to follow the Constitution. Congress needs to have a role in this, and it just isn't the president who makes these decisions." But as of now, those incidences have been few and far between. And if they don't wake up and do it, we're going to lose it, and that's not a good thing.
John, I got this theory I want to run by you and see what you think. I I believe that what Trumpism has done is sort of stripped our politics right to the studs, right? Everything, all the drywall and the insulation and the paint and all the fixtures, it's all gone. It's right down to the studs. And the only thing that matters now to the right and MAGA and Republicans, the only thing, there is no more. Remember these times when like lobbyists or groups or whatever would come to DC and like, hey, Senator such and such, couldn't you just go from a 49 to a 51 or a 47 to like there was a subtle policy negotiation and you counted on senators over there to just do the right thing. The, that sort of ethereal stuff is gone. And now we're down to the only thing that matters is electoral politics. That's it, whether they keep their seat or lose their seat. And so Tillis looked at that and said, I'm not going to be able to do all this and keep my seat. I'm out of here. He did the right thing. I wish he'd have done it 4 years ago. And so now I think that as Democrats, we need, or folks who care about the country, we need to understand the only thing that motivates that side is losing or winning seats. And I say this as a run up to we're headed into 2026 and 2028, and they're doing some unpopular things that I think are going to have very bad electoral consequences. And I wonder what you think about that, and if you think maybe there's going to be more Tillises and more folks in the House who realize there's bad electoral consequences coming for this.
Yeah, well, I think that absolutely is going to happen. I think there's going to be more and more folks who take a look at it. I'm going to tell you, we also saw it from the Democratic side. We saw a lot of folks retire early because it's a pain in the ass, quite frankly. I mean, they're not getting policy done. It's all about politics all the time, and Congress isn't inserting themselves. I haven't talked to them about why they stepped down, but the truth is, I could see it. I could see why. And so you've got that, and then you've got the folks that are going to look at it from an electoral standpoint and say, this isn't worth it. And especially when you have the president saying, if you don't agree with me 100% of the time, I'm going to run a primary against you. And, about 15% of the people vote in those primaries and they'll be able to take them out. So all that is there. But I would just back up a little bit. All this is because of a decision made by the Supreme Court back in 2010 called Citizens United, where we have seen a tenfold increase in the amount of money coming into these elections. And it doesn't make our democracy work better. It doesn't inform the electorate when they go to the polls in a better way. In fact, just the opposite, I contend. And so if we want to get our arms around the folks who are doing things just so they can get reelected, um, then we ought to fix Citizens United. We'll probably, I imagine we're going to get into public lands at some point in time. All that's happening. All that privatization of public lands effort that's out there is to give their donors a scratch on the back because they put millions of dollars into these campaigns. And that's why that issue isn't going to go away. But we'll talk about that later. But the fact of the matter is you're right. I think everything is based upon the next election. And it's not based upon compromise. It's not based upon getting together and finding common ground. It's based upon what you can do that's stupid that might get you elected. And that's a fact.
Yeah. I mean, I think, but before we move on, Rachel, I think something in this bill that's going to be very impactful, something that Senator Tester cares a lot about, and I do, what they've done to Medicaid and healthcare, especially in states like Montana, is going to reverberate for decades, and it's horrific. I mean, it's not. When I ran for governor, some of the most poignant meetings I had were with hospital executives, most of which were probably Republican voters or considered themselves conservative. But when they shut the door in those boardrooms and explained, and because Medicaid expansion in Montana, for those of you outside the state, so was a big deal here, and we wanted to make sure we kept it. And those hospital executives would shut the door and say, "Look, if we don't get this done, um, ambulance services are going to go away. Our rural clinics are going to close down. Mental health care programs are going to go away. Substance abuse programs are going to go away because those are all either funded or subsidized by federal health care insurance, Medicaid. And in a state like Montana, we could lose 7, 8, 9, 10 rural clinics. People who are now driving 60 miles, 80 miles for service might be driving double that. You're not going to have emergency health services. And so what this big beautiful bill did is essentially reverse Medicaid expansion that has happened in states like Montana. It's going to slowly gut healthcare funding for states like ours, and that's a scary, disastrous outcome that's headed our way. Zinke voted for it. Downing voted for it. Daines voted for it.
Yep. And it ain't going to happen overnight. It's going to take a little time, and their hope is people will forget. And that's the truth.
Well, and it does, I mean, I actually have been working on an episode about this kind of more in depth about rural hospitals across the country, because I think there's a lot of confusion around what exactly this means and what will do, and the amount of money that rural hospitals inject into those communities and what it means for their economies. But also, I read kind of this infographic of what Medicaid is called in each state, and there are a lot of people on Medicaid that don't actually know they're on Medicaid because it's
Yeah.
called something else in their state.
Right.
And
Right.
that that again, like that I put some blame on the journalists out there for not spelling this out more clearly in ways that people can understand. We need to be better at that. There is a Politico piece out today, talking about lobbyists kind of gearing up to persuade lawmakers to rescind this because it does, some of the worst effects don't take effect until a couple of years from now. I mean, we talked to Cory Booker about that, Senator, a little bit. Is there anything that can be done? What do you think? Do you think lobbyists can pressure lawmakers to rescind this?
Congress needs to step up and do their job. Lobbyists are part of the equation, but they're not the most important part. Part of this equation is Congress. And I would just say this, the amount of money that is generated into the communities is huge, but it's bigger than that. It's about access to healthcare. People will leave those communities because they've got to have access to healthcare, and it'll be another nail in the coffin of rural America. And for folks who represent rural America to vote for this bill, and by the way, Tillis understood it, and that's why he voted against it. But the truth is, for folks who represent rural America to vote for this bill and then walk around and say, "Oh, don't worry about it," um, I'm just going to say that's political malpractice. Because the truth is that what they voted for in this bill is going to do draconian things to our healthcare system in rural America. It's going to hurt urban America too, by the way, but it's going to do some draconian things in rural America. And I think Ryan is right. We could easily lose 8 or 10 medical centers in this state. It could even be worse than that. And it's part of their Project 2025, by the way.
Yeah.
It was written down. It's written on paper. This is what they're going to do. When we tried to warn some people during the campaign about it, they were in denial, but I don't think they're in denial anymore.
One story though about, like, I was in the Billings clinic during the campaign, shut the door, wanted to talk about Medicaid expansion. They said, "Hey," and I wrote a Substack about this, but this is what's coming down the pike for the country and for Montana. They said, "Just so happens we have a older Native American gentleman who was just we just put him in the ICU. He had multiple heart attacks this morning, and his story is one you ought to hear." I said, "Well, what happened?" It's, "Well, a couple weeks ago, Gianforte, who is our governor, had used this this trickery, which they're going to use similar trickery across the country to kick this guy. 132,000 Montanans got kicked off their healthcare coverage, Medicaid coverage. This guy was one of them. 2 weeks before he shows up at the clinic to get his heart meds, they say, "Sorry, sir, you're booted off Medicaid. You got to go back and reapply." Well, the reapplication process was a shit show, and he couldn't get reapplied. So he went 2 weeks without his heart meds. On about after the second week, he has a couple massive heart attacks. He shows up in the ICU. So instead of providing him with $30 worth of heart meds through Medicaid, our governor decides to kick him off of Medicaid, and now he's in the ICU. So the immorality of it is just shocking. But the stupidity of the business sense of this is really shocking. $30 versus what's it cost in the ICU per minute? $3,000 a minute? I don't even know. Cardiac ICU, and insured customers and the hospital are bearing that expense. So if you care about your healthcare expense or your healthcare coverage or your hospital staying in business, that's a story that's going to be reenacted multiple times, and it's immoral, and it's stupid from a dollars and cents standpoint.
We have a comment from Pam. She says Montana's getting ready to ask for a waiver to allow co-pays and work requirements be instituted early here. I read about that. And we have other people commenting too that, even if Congress stepped up, I mean, Senator, do you think they'd need a veto-proof margin to get Trump to even sign anything?
Probably. That'd be my guess. I mean, he had to have it done by July the 4th. I don't know why, but, they couldn't debate it. They couldn't do what they needed to do. Just had to pass it, and they did. And it's on them. It's not on Trump. So, yeah, I mean, I think the horse is out of the barn on this. I think it's really going to be tough to bring it back.
Well, let's talk about public lands now that we're kind of into stuff in the bill. We know that you both have talked a lot about this and been very outspoken about this. I know Ryan has written about it. So the provision to sell off public lands, Mike Lee's provision, was removed from the big bill. But as I'm hearing and reading, this fight isn't over. So let's get into it. Like, what are your number one concerns, Ryan?
Well, first off, um, I'm going to correct your reporting there.
Okay, let's
Mike,
do it. Sorry.
well, no, I'm frustrated that that's labeled as a Mike Lee proposal. Why? Because, look, this is in the Republican Party platforms for 11 state Republican parties, including Montana, for 11 state platforms, and has been for 15 years across the West. It's been in the National Republican Party platform. Almost every single House member, when that bill was in the House, almost 200 and some Republican House members voted yes. Um, all and basically all the Republican senators were set to vote yes. There was some waffling around with Daines and Sheehy and the Idaho senators. They never had to vote. But the fact that they even had to think about it, or that it was a tough moral decision. Gosh, do we say yes on selling our public lands? Up to 330 million acres, 40% of our national birthright, was in that bill. And it was a tough call for them. So if you think, like, this is on the knife's edge all the time, and it's woven throughout Republican Party politics. They've been telling you they're going to do it. They've been trying to do it in the states. They wrote it into their platforms. They're elected, and they plan on doing it. So yeah, Mike Lee. I'm sure. John didn't spend a lot of time with Senator Lee. I got lots of words for that guy. He's not the most enjoyable cat in the world. But this did not just come from Mike Lee. This is deep inside Republican politics, and as Senator Chester said earlier, this is a payoff to their big corporate buddies. You know, Ryan Zinke made $1 million a year after he got kicked out of the Trump administration. What do you have to do to get kicked out of the Trump administration? That's an impressive feat. But he made almost $1 million a year lobbying for who? ConocoPhillips and big mining corporations. This is just a payoff to them.
Yep. All I can say is he's right, and all I can tell you is that it isn't just Mike Lee. And in fact, the way it came out with the exemption for Montana, that was put in there because people thought that they'd get a free pass if that was put in there. Talking about Steve Daines in particular, okay? And the truth is that he sits to the right of Mike Lee, right next to him. He's next in line to be chair of that committee.
He voted for him to be chair of the committee.
Yeah.
He voted
What's
for him.
that?
He
Yeah.
voted for him to be chair of the committee.
Yeah.
Like it, like people say, like, "Gosh, who's this Mike Lee guy? Where'd he come from?" He's the one that you guys made the head of the Republican policy coalition. He's the one that you elected as the chair of the party or the chair of the committee. Remember that guy? They act like they're surprised by him.
Yeah, yeah, and they should be. I mean, the truth is that's where it is, and the fact is that I have watched for 18 years what Ryan was just talking about, and this is part of what they want to do. They want to get rid of public lands. Now, I'm not saying all Republicans want that. There's a lot of good conservation Republicans out there that like to go hunting and fishing that want those public lands because that's their access to some of the best fishing and hunting and hiking in the country. But the truth is, a lot of folks, especially folks who don't break their office doors, don't understand the value of public lands, and they don't understand the value of public lands when it comes to the environment either. So let's get rid of them. What the hell, you know? Let's make let's make the West like the East, I guess. Although there's a lot of important public lands in east of the Mississippi
Mhm.
too that are really important. So I think that this issue is going to be around for a while. And I think people need to pay attention, and I think they ought to ignore the fucking rhetoric that's coming out of a lot of these politicians' mouths that say, "Well, I really wasn't for selling these public lands." But the truth is, they vote for everything that has to happen for them to be able to sell those public lands.
Right. Exactly.
That's what
Here's
it
something
Zinke voted for the budget rule to make it possible to calculate it for reconciliation. Right? I mean, Daines has done nothing in his career except for weaken public lands management so that this is more possible. So this gibberish about them being not for selling public lands, their actions for the last 15 years have told you they've been ramping up to do this. And Burgum's going to try it through the Secretary of Interior. He's going to try to force it that way. They're going to take more and more and more runs at it. They do not like this idea that the American public, and when people say, well, the federal government shouldn't own land, the federal government doesn't own land. The people of the United States own the land. We entrust the federal government to manage it for us. We have done that. We have passed the laws. We have established the management agencies. We established national parks through our government. We own it. You own it. You're listening to us right now. You're a citizen. You're a single mom in Chicago. You're a farmer in Big Sandy, Montana. You're a executive in Houston, Texas. You own this land. Like it's a cool thing. So when we talk about American exceptionalism, I hear this phrase bantered around all the time. There's nothing more exceptional than the idea that we trust ourselves to own 640 million acres of land. No place else in the world does that. Literally, it's the definition of being exceptional. We are exceptional in that. We trust ourselves to do that. So when they want to, they're going to take another run at it. Lee is going to do it. Burgum's going to do it. Be ready. And there's all this word about keep public lands in public hands. I just about ready to launch a new logo. I say keep public lands out of Republican hands. That's my new logo.
you have artwork for that already made?
I'll have it to you. I'll have it to you this week.
So one thing that went kind of, I think went underreported is that the feds took a step last week to open more than 2,600 square miles of lands in Montana and Wyoming to sell leases for coal mining. So that is larger than the state of Delaware. And in the big bill that we're talking about, while that one provision was stripped to sell off public lands, the royalty payments for companies that mine coal on public lands went down from 12.5% to 7%. So that money historically collected by the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, and then it's shared back with the states. So they lowered the amount of money coming back in from these existing leases. I mean, these things are all related to this conversation that we were having about public lands.
You first, Ryan.
Well, I want to start by saying Senator Tester was a champion. A I saw him multiple times keep his word on votes on kind of this subject and the periphery of this subject when it wasn't always in his political best interest to do it, but it was in his moral best interest to do it. We have to have power as a country. We have to have power. We're sitting here right here on Substack on our phones. I know Tester's probably cussing at his phone this morning, couldn't get it to work, but it wouldn't have worked without power, right? We have to have power. So coal isn't just going away, but what they're doing in this bill, it's not just the subsidization of coal. It is yanking any support from all the renewables. And in the end, there's a few big mining and coal executives are going to get richer, and the country is going to get much poorer. Your energy rates are set to skyrocket because the most economically feasible ways to generate energy now, solar and wind, um, are being yanked by this bill. And so it's to me, this is kind of like somebody back in the day saying, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I know we got those light bulbs, but I want to keep the candle factories open." I mean,
Yep.
it's silly talk.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree 100%. And the other thing I'll tell you, to drop the royalties doesn't make any sense. It's gonna put more pressure on state budgets, just like the Medicaid stuff's gonna put more pressure on state budgets. So we didn't talk about that, by the way. They'll blame the states for the hospitals closing. They won't blame themselves when in fact they're the ones that are responsible for it. But and the truth is that, I'll bet you that our, power rates don't drop by 5.5% because of that reduction in royalty. I'll bet you money on that.
Oh,
And the
hell
truth
no.
is this is all crazy, and Ryan is exactly right. While you take away everything on the non-carbon-based fuel and put everything into the carbon-based fuel era, and we've gotta have juice. I mean, I use a lot of diesel, and you're right, when I turn the lights on, it's fired by coal. But to do this makes no sense other than just like selling the public lands, it's just giving a scratch to the people who put them in office. And it's not about the people. It's not about the folks that are working hard every day to make sure that they are able to pay their bills. This is about making sure that the big money folks get even more money. And that, by the way, is contrary to everything that Trump says, but that's what he does on every issue. Says, "You know what? I'm gonna do this," and then does the opposite, and it's the same thing here.
Okay, 2 more things. I know Tester's chomping at
Yep.
the bit. So, Ryan, I just wanna ask you, I mean, you were a firearms exec. We saw a couple, firearms provisions stripped by the parliamentarian from that bill. We saw some others go forward, but when you're looking at kinda we know this flood the zone tactic. We know we're talking today about immigration and tariffs and the bill and all of that, but what are you watching for in the realm of firearms going forward under this administration?
So I think that, and I've been concerned about this for a while. And full disclosure, I spent 25 years in the firearms industry. I'm a gun guy. I hunt and shoot and target shoot with my boys every chance I get. I own lots of guns and don't really know how many I own, and that pisses my wife off because she says that makes me sound like a redneck. And I guess sometimes I kind of am a redneck. But I'm very concerned about the ways in which firearms and firearms marketing are used to radicalize our political sphere. And I don't think any responsible gun owner is okay with many of the things that are going on. I'm one who wants to protect my Second Amendment rights, and I think that means we need to be responsible. So this idea that we're going to take, like, there are people now inside the Trump administration who don't think that anybody should have to undergo a background check ever for any gun purchase. Um, that's very dangerous. That's not something that real gun people want because we understand that we need to protect our rights and that we have to live in a civil society. I don't really want to live in a society that looks like January 6th. I don't. And so I think I'm really concerned about the ways firearms marketing and sort of the irresponsible chatter that's happening is going on. I'm worried about that.
Okay, my last question for you both. It's really a lot to do with Senator Tester here. Senate is they're expected to take up a vote on the rescissions package, which basically just means they would codify more than $9 billion in those Doge cuts, including foreign aid, cuts to NPR, PBS. Now, Trump has publicly threatened Republicans who might oppose this. The Senate has until the 18th, so just a couple of days to vote here, to vote on this package, which basically would just claw back that money that Congress already authorized. What's going to happen, Senator?
Yeah, well, it's probably gonna pass, but here's the deal, I'm sure that some of that money should be clawed back, but Congress's role here is to make sure that they know the impacts of the decisions before they vote for the bill or vote against the bill. And, I've never been somebody that says, just because Congress appropriated the money, we shouldn't take a look at it and make sure it's being spent properly, and if it's not, then, hold people accountable. And if it's not being spent, bring it back. That's not the issue here. The issue here is that it's a big rescissions package. We saw what Doge did. We've seen what happened in Texas with the people that have died because of floods. We're, the list goes on and on. Congress needs to make sure that those rescissions meet the needs of the people out there that are impacted. And if they don't, they shouldn't vote for the bill, or they should amend the bill so it does. And so that's what I would say. As far as the threats from the president, at some point in time, these folks that serve in Congress need to grow a set and do what's right. And that's exactly what needs to happen.
But if the E in Doge stands for efficiency,
Yeah.
how efficient is it for Congress to authorize spending and then go back and say, "Oh, maybe not"? I mean,
Well,
that
look,
doesn't seem like efficient to me.
no, it is efficient.
Oh, okay.
When they authorize the spending and then they go and they take a look to make sure that people are held accountable how the money is being spent, and if the money isn't being spent, bring it back so it's just not sitting there. That's not a bad thing to do. That's actually a pretty good thing to do. What I'm concerned about here is they're gonna codify a lot of the stuff that Doge put through. And a lot of that stuff, you got rid of good people that do good things, that allow people to fly into places like Newark, New Jersey, that allow, people to, when they call up the weather service, to find out what's really going on as far as the potential weather threats. And the list goes on and on and on. The USAID stuff. Look, there's not a person in I shouldn't say that. Most of the people in Congress understand that USAID gives this country incredible soft power. If you're cutting USAID, just remember, you better beef up your military because you're going to need more bullets and more bombs, because that's the kind of stuff where China's backfilling what we were doing and getting a lot of goodwill out of it. And then, a lot of our power comes from our allies. And we've seen this administration time and time and time again push away our allies and then replace them with nothing other than, we're going to put a tariff on you, or we're going to call you a bad person because you're a democracy, or whatever it might be. So,
And as
you know,
Nancy pointed out in our chat earlier here on this live Substack, the whole firing of State Department staff too over the
yeah.
last week.
And by the way, the impacts of that aren't going to be felt right now, but they sure in hell will be felt in the future. And it's not going to be good. It's just not going to be good.
I love seeing both you guys in the morning, but now I'm depressed because I'm pissed off that Tester's not my senator anymore. Because that
Well,
sounds
he's
like
pissed.
something a U.S. senator would say, not that gibberish I'm hearing back there coming from back east now.
Yeah, well, it's it's the way it is. I mean, look, these guys, I think over time will get their feet, but I don't, Democrats haven't got their feet. Republicans don't either. They don't know how to handle what's going on. And the truth is, they just need to look at the Constitution, read it, understand it, quit looking for loopholes, and do their job.
I want to thank you both. Is there anything I missed? Anything you want to talk? You want to talk about Disneyland? Because our vice president was there this weekend.
Oh, that's great. Good. I got a couple of kids that I think are at Disney World right now. So,
Oh, really?
yeah,
You didn't even tell me.
yeah. Well, 50th birthday, you got to revert back to your childhood. So
I
that's it.
support it. I
Yep.
support it. All right. Well, we want to thank you, Ryan, for joining
Yeah,
us.
good to see you guys.
Yep.
And I just want to say thanks again, JT, for everything you did for the state. And get out there and get to work. You don't even have any grease on your hands yet. I don't know what you've been doing. Get out there.
He even put out a nice shirt for you. Like that. He's really stepping up his game. We can't leave before we ask John Tester about his hat, because that's what we do here.
So
Is it Carol? Is that what
it's
it is?
Carroll College, yeah, Carroll College hat. I figured since I wore an M-Sun hat, I figured we ought to Carroll hat.
Listen, yes, M-Sun is part of my legacy now. But Carroll College, hey, that's a good school. I read it right there in Helena, Montana.
Yeah,
Do you have a hat for every school in Montana?
not all of them. I got about 4 of them. But my daughter graduated from Carroll, and it is a good school.
All right. All right. Well, thanks so much to Ryan for joining us, our friends at Pearl Jam for letting us use their music. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate all of your support, and we will announce our next episode here coming up. We're working on a good one for you, so I hope we can announce that maybe later today.
Good stuff. Everybody have a good day.
You too.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.